I'm Christian.
What?
Oh, we're not doing this.
Now you're just being difficult. All right.
No, but
You're listening to the Total Perspective Vortex. I'm Tragula.
and I'm Christian.
It's June 11th, 2020. Recent events where I think we're on day 2 of the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, the
Right.
Chaz in
The
the
jazz.
Chaz in Seattle.
Right.
So Christian, let's talk about what's going on in the world today.
Yeah, sounds good. So the whole what's it called? The Chaz?
Yeah,
What's the full name?
The Chaz. It's the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone.
Right. So taken over by communists, and they're already starving after 2 days.
Yeah, and there's a it's also interesting. So they have food shortage issues, but uh, also that they have set up borders, as you pointed out, around the edge,
Right.
with armed guards around on the borders.
Right.
They have there's uh, a warlord who set himself up basically, who's shaking down businesses for protection money. So
Right.
there's
So who's
there's
the warlord? Like, have you looked into that?
a little bit. I
A
mean, I've
little
seen a
bit.
couple of videos. Some apparently there's been people have been calling the police because he's been roughing people up, or his gang has been roughing people up,
They've been
and
calling the
the
police?
yes, and the
Is that
police
right?
and the police just tell them that the Chaz can take care of it.
Is that right? Oh,
Yeah,
that's so many excellent lessons. It devolved so quickly. This is record time for socialism. Uh, so they ran out of food day two, and now they're already calling the cops. They essentially so they built walls, and they have like their
yeah.
well regulated militia,
Well,
right?
I mean,
Like
we say
they're
it's this is the whole thing is that they don't socialism works by taking other people's stuff, right?
right,
And what we're actually seeing is the problems that would occur with any sort of new settlement too. But it's interesting that you see
right,
that like they think that they're inventing something completely new, but
right,
they have borders, they have armed militia, they have tax collection. You know, they have a board of a board of directors, but no one wants to stand up and be a leader. Like they have all the ills of society that they think they were trying to escape, just in this
right,
microcosm instantly.
right. And now they're starting to run out of other people's stuff almost immediately.
Yeah,
So, so is that right? They're because I've seen a few. I didn't dive deeply into it, but so they're trying to extort money from local businesses.
yeah. Well, I mean, I've heard reports, right? So I'm not a journalist, so I just see what I see on Twitter and in news articles. So this is all like, you know, but definitively I've heard so I can't be definitive in these things, but I've seen reports that they're going around to local businesses within the zone and saying you need to give us $500 so we can protect you.
Wow, wow, yeah. It descended really quickly, like the.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, I mean, you say descended, but this is there. I think there's an appreciation, like there's these necessities that you have to have if you're going to have a society. Like we don't have police because we necessarily, you know, we want to have police. Like it's just like we think it'd be
right,
really good to have people going around with all the monopoly and violence, right? It's because it's a necessity, and we realize that if we're going to have a society that this is the most efficient way to organize things. It's for the pragmatic reasons. And the big problem with this is that we don't teach civics. We don't teach people how society works or why these things exist, and they don't value the complexity. So they don't
right,
value um, that the system could be a lot would be a lot worse. They think, and this is, you know, if you see the sort of the resentment myths that they put forward on the left, it's they don't really they don't do, and they've learned this from communism. Like originally in the the old school Marxist communists, they talk about the utopia, and they'd really specify what that utopia would be like.
Right.
They don't make that mistake anymore. Now they focus much more on the resentment and criticizing the status quo.
Right.
But if you, and this is the example of, where I'm going at it like with the Shaz, they're seeing that the reasons for the way this society has been set up become laid bare, right? You get all those social problems exposed, and you sort of see like, oh, this is why we have a police force. Oh, this is
Right.
why we have borders. Oh,
Right.
this is why some people have guns and other people don't, right?
Right. So I, I wonder, I don't know if you can answer this, but what do you think, what do you think this will do for the virtue signaling of the left? Are they going to be self-reflective on this, or I
No,
mean,
absolutely not. Uh,
okay.
no, I mean that's a hard no
Yeah.
because they're never self-reflective, and they're cultivating it within people, narcissism and an ability and a rejection of self-reflection, right? Their whole ideology that its power is in its destructiveness is to tear stuff down and to have this righteous indignation as you're tearing things down, right?
Right.
So it's an ideology of destruction, and that's what they're. So their self-reflection would destroy the whole operation, and it is something that's it's self-feeding now, right? So they have like a shakedown. If you look at this Black Lives Matters, and that they have, it's like a shakedown mechanism,
Right.
where like if when they get institutions or organizations to capitulate, the demands are always more money, more power, so we can come back and raid you again a little bit later. So it's the same sort of appeasement shake that you'd see like pirates or barbarian raiders in times past, where the
Hmm.
power comes like we'll tear your stuff down, give us something to appease us, but that
It's
will make us stronger and just delay the attack.
it's fascinating because you say that, like, so now we have to look at how barbarians would have acted, and kind of that's where we're looking at now. Or just to continue on the point I'm trying to make is, like, they're also looking into farming. So I went to that subreddit where
Mm-hmm.
they're discussing, certain things. I think there's a lot of trolling going on that one. It's pretty
Mm-hmm.
funny. But what's it called? The what Chaz? What does that stand for again? The
Capitol Hill,
Capitol Hill. All
autonomous
right, autonomous
zone.
zone. Right. So, but it's interesting because now we have to pull back. Like, this makes me want to do some more research into things past, because this is so foundational what they're trying to do in some
Yeah.
sense.
Well,
And
the other
yeah,
thing is that I bet they're going to find out how to do this stuff like the farming and that. I bet they're going to prepper sites,
right. They're
right?
going to all these right wing sites about the foundations of how to build a society and so on, and how to deal with violence, and it's
Yeah.
all right. This is
So
what
you
we've been talking about.
so
you
it's
know,
suddenly there's a but they're trying to do it without the value of personal responsibility or autonomy, and that makes it more difficult, right? Because it makes it
right.
harder for people to take blame or diffuse blame. And that's interesting is you'll see that with this I think is like you're asking at the warlord. I think his name is Waz.
Something,
It
yeah.
sounds sort of like a an orc from a role playing game or something, right? Waz, chief of the Chaz. Like talking about barbarians. It's
Yeah, 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 yeah.
um, but it, uh, in his I seen like one of his tweets retweeted, and he's basically not taking responsibilities for his actions. So he was responding to one of Donald Trump's tweets on one of the president's tweets on the formation of Chaz in Seattle, and
Okay.
his response was basically he took it on like it was a slight against him, and like the president was calling him out, but he didn't do anything, right? Like he hasn't done
No.
anything. He's just a innocent lamb in the woods, and then that's sort of
Oh,
that's there's that rejection of responsibility within the ideology, but also the call to victimhood. So like the president's remarks was clearly about like just saying how the Chaz is a stupid idea, and like and this is what you get for following the ideologies. It was more along the sort of like this is not going to happen in Trump's America type of politicking, but
right.
was like bringing it all onto himself. Waz or whatever. Like saying, "Oh, he's the president's calling me out," right? Was basically response, and then, but I didn't do anything. So it's sort of like I'm the target of all the evil in the world, but I am not responsible for anything.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and that's key to that cultivation of the resentful spirit, which is how they get the violence and the tearing things down. That then they utilize like the sophisticated operators, the people who are making it into a business, like the people who've set up a bank account and some sort of corporate entity for Black Lives Matter, who are collecting all these checks from organizations. The shakedown experts have they use the opportunity to make sure weaved into their demands. They're like, oh, you need more diversity officers. You need to give us more resources. You need to spend more money on people who follow our ideology. So next time, so that'll placate us for 6 months, and then next time we'll come down even harder on you, right? And you'll have to give us more.
Right. It's the book Dune covers that. It's like where as soon as you give in to any kind of those demands, they just become greater and greater. And so it becomes very dangerous, even just that first time, to say, hey, I'll give you this. They ask for a bribe, you give them that bribe, you've just started something.
Yeah,
um,
yeah. It's like hitting the snooze button.
it's
If
like hitting this. Oh, that's, yeah,
right,
I like
like
that analogy.
that's the strategy. Except hitting the snooze button, but each time you're making the alarm stronger and more potentially more deadly in some regard.
Okay, so the analogy breaks down a little bit as
Well,
this
yeah. Well, I mean, like
as this
you're more risking your job, let's say. But I mean, so
right.
the danger is increasing every time you press the button.
No, I know. I think we should stick with it. I like
The,
the
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 idea of
alarm clock
the
that gets like like progressively more dangerous looking and bigger and like
yeah,
grows teeth. Yeah,
yeah.
I like
Every
that.
time
I,
you try and
you
you
hit
press
the
the
snooze
button,
button. Yeah,
it's like you're feeding it.
you're feeding it.
Yeah,
Cool.
it's more along the lines of Little Shop of Horrors. If you've seen that movie,
I haven't. I'm not. I'm not.
okay,
I'm not culturally.
okay.
Little
It's
Shop of
it's
Horrors.
actually originally in a musical, I believe. But
I was
there's a
gonna say,
movie
yeah,
version.
Broadway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where there's an alien plant that he feeds, and as the plant gets bigger and more demanding as he feeds it. Right. So first it just wants a few drops of blood, and eventually it wants human sacrifice.
Right. Right.
Right. Right. And but the plant takes care of him too. Right. So in that regard, like it's he has some incentive of like something that he's getting out of the plant. But every time he feeds the plant, it becomes more dangerous and more
That's
trouble. Yeah.
that can be like as like the word I have is myth, but it's not what I'm looking for. But that's pretty intelligent stuff for Broadway, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I haven't watched that many Broadway musicals or that, but I think that uh, it, in good storytelling, you're always going to find those mythic forms of those useful um, algorithms. That's what that why they resonate with people, right? The big foundation of religions are these useful stories, right?
Right.
And um, the stories that resonate with people are the ones that uh, why they resonate is because they have the people, you can subconsciously see some utility in your life or some patterns. You recognize the pattern in the story, and that it's something that has occurred in your own life. So you may not have seen that voracious monster plant who's feeding you, but each time that's making your life better in some way. But each time you feed it, it it becomes more dangerous and it will eventually doom you. But there are hooks in there that in that problem scenario that match on to problems you faced in your own life, right? So that's
Addiction,
yeah,
addiction, bad relationships, all sorts of things. Yeah.
yeah. So and one of this is one of the problems with propaganda, especially like the leftist propaganda, is that it's this tear down propaganda is intrinsically not useful. So it makes it harder to sell as a story in a certain way. So they have to really manage the story and not let anyone contradict it or question it. And even then, like this is why a lot of Hollywood movies are falling apart, is because the demands for ideological purity are ever increasing, and each time you increase the ideological purity, you decrease the resonance with reality and the actual utility of the story. So
Right.
it loses its mythological or religious impact utility, and it doesn't resonate with people as much as before.
Right.
So people talk about how Star Wars, the original Star Wars, which is now Episode 4, was this follow the structure of an epic Greek myth, right? And that's because that story structure has a lot says a lot about the human condition, right? A it's the beginnings of a religion are a story like that.
Right. And well, having read Joseph Campbell, so when we're talking about myths and the hero's journey and so on, having read Joseph Campbell, they actually communicated with each other. It was a very deliberate attempt to follow this structure. Like Joseph Campbell actually had quite a bit of influence on
Mm-hmm.
um, what's his name again?
George Lucas.
George Lucas, and I guess maybe the people around George Lucas,
Yeah.
because we also saw that when those people were gone, he wasn't quite as
Well, this is the thing that it like often. Um, I think George Lucas is a victim of his own creativity, right? Because he's so open to new ideas and he's so creative that he needed someone to give him boundaries, and
interesting.
that's what happened. That was really the problem with the prequel movies, is that he there wasn't enough pushback. He became a victim of his own success, in the sense of like no one had the ability to rein him in anymore. He didn't have a good enough soundboard for someone to sort of make sure that he stayed within the patterns, because
Right.
he has like this tendency to go away and be so creative and take things in interesting new directions.
Right.
To tie it together, like these epic myths and stories, is they resonate when they are well formed, when they have utility with dealing with reality, right? So
Right.
it goes from like a story is useful because we have this metaphorical thinking, right, in the subjective, where we can take a literal occurrence that happened to someone or ourselves and map that in certain ways onto some other situation that may arise. And if we can take out that moral of the story or that lesson, right? That's you used to hear about morals of stories. You don't hear the morals of the stories anymore,
Right.
right? Um, but that's sort of like the beginning of morality, or the beginning of sophisticated religions, is when you start binding those morals into a more sophisticated but also more abstract system that has more utility, can be used in different situations.
Right.
Uh,
And it's interesting you say that. You don't hear that anymore. The
yeah,
moral, you know, I can think of the Avengers, kind of that series, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Apart from what's her name, the Captain Marvel, which has no
Yeah,
arc, and
yeah, but that's the newer
uh,
ones, so like the previous
right,
ones. But I mean, even then,
but
like that language when I was like back in the 80s and 90s, you'd still people talk about the morals of the story, and when
right,
I remember, um, like it would be a common question after a school teacher or a
right,
librarian read you a story, they'd ask you, so what's the moral of this story,
right.
right?
But
And
but
you,
it's not in common parlance anymore. Like you don't hear that. You
yeah,
don't
and
hear
that's
like
intentional because now the stories are not. It's not about morality; it's about ideology, right?
right,
So it would be, the parlance today would be like they wouldn't say this overtly because the idea is to put in these malformed ideas into your head. So, but really, it's like, what is the ideological lesson of this story?
right.
Right?
Okay,
It's not. It's not about the utility of a moral, which has some utility to reality. Is what you're pulling out. It's going to be like an ideological lesson, it like white men are evil or something along those lines, right? Or
right.
Johnny
Yeah,
is oppressed.
right, right. So it's just a form of preaching rather than potentially good storytelling. Is that kind of what you're saying, or
Well, I mean, preaching can be good storytelling. I think
hmm,
good preaching should be good storytelling because
good
they
preaching? Should, okay.
right like
You want to flesh that out?
well, I mean it because I kept on tying it back to that's what religion is. That's what a well formed religion is those little strings of morality that you can pull out of stories woven into an intricate system of how to live your life,
Right.
right? So a good preacher, if we're talking about the religious figure or a priest, has to be a good storyteller because he has to, and the divination of that, like if they're uh, is from studying the Bible. That is, they know they would know those biblical stories or the stories of their religion, and their utility to the society would be to know those stories, but also to be able to tell the stories that best fit the situation that the person was experiencing, right? So, like from interpreting the Word of God, um,
I don't know why you put that between quotes.
I was just because I'm trying to. People can't see my quote fingers. You calling out my quote fingers. Um,
Yeah. But yeah, I think your tone changed and stuff. No, no, yeah, the
yeah,
word of
there
God.
was tone. Okay, I had tone. I had tone. Thank you for tone policing me.
Tone police.
to,
Just say word of God. Just
yeah,
word, yeah, word of God.
word of God.
Word of
But
God.
but but
Yeah.
but translating the word of God, um, was sorry. Okay, they're the interpreting the word of God is taking this complex memetics.
Thank you.
I'm going to throw in another word jargon in the memetic system or system
Right.
store complex weave of stories, like this huge sort of database on the story, and basically being the Google that pulls out the relevant story that the person best fits the person's life and situation.
Okay, now
And
I'm not liking the way you're reducing priests.
yeah, but as a storyteller, yeah, they're going the priest or preacher is basically ensuring that the person gets the right moral message that they need at this time to help them with the problem and that's in their life that they're confronting.
Okay. All
Right.
right.
So
It's
I
probably a
mean
good
we could
place to
get that
stop.
in. We can get more into that another time.
For sure, for sure. And I'll make sure to pray for you next time.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Talk about the power of prayer because it's something I believe in as a devout
Right. Yeah.
atheist.
Yeah. I
and
look
and
forward to.
yeah.
If anything, you're helping me become a better Christian, and kind of understanding, I guess, the mechanics of it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we might think that we're doing different things potentially, but there is some.
And
Even if you're agnostic or atheist, yeah,
that's
there's
the
some real
ultimate
utility.
project of this podcast is what I'm trying to do is show people how religion works, and the framework that we can and develop a framework or that we can use to judge what is a good religion, what is a bad religion, and how we can improve our religions, and from that also improve our societies. So, to battle the extreme relativism that the left or communists use as a weapon to tear down Western society.
Well, that's definitely something we can agree on. So, and I look forward to future conversations on that. And yeah, I think that about wraps it up for today.
All right.
So thank you, everyone. And this was the Total Perspective Vortex. Cheers.
Cheers.